Hey, everybody, welcome in. Tom Callahan here with you, flying solo today. Robyn Leano is enjoying a much-deserved day off, so you got me today. Thanks for making the Locked On Utah Hockey Club podcast your first listen every single day. And then when you're done with us, check out your other fine shows. We're going to be pumping out a lot of content here as we get closer to the season. We're going to talk some fantasy hockey in a later episode, but we do have a great fantasy hockey podcast. So I know a lot of you are getting closer to your drafts, looking for value at this point, especially in your deeper leagues. That's a great place to go. Check out our Locked On Fantasy podcast, as well as the Locked On NHL National Show if you're craving a little bit of that. We'll mix in some national news, but obviously we focus on the Utah Hockey Club. Today on the show, 3 pressing needs for Utah Hockey Club. Who or what can make an immediate impact for this club, and who's got the potential to surprise? That's always one of my favorite questions coming out of training camp. All that and more coming your way on the Locked On Utah Hockey Club podcast, and it starts right now.
You are Locked On Utah Hockey Club, your daily podcast on the Utah Hockey Club, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And again, Tom Callahan here with you. Thanks for joining us. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, well, as I mentioned, Robyn Leano, well-deserved day off today. So you got me flying solo here today, and I appreciate you being here and being a part of the Locked On chatter. And you know what? As I was putting the show together today, there were more than a few things that were going through my head. There's a lot of directions we could go. Heck, we could even talk about all the new food offerings. We already talked about the budget concessions, but they're talking about all that. And so I'm going to wait for Robyn to come back. We'll get into that and what their goal is for the experience. Speaking of experience, they've introduced a whole opening night fiesta. It's going to be a giant party down there at the Delta Center. We'll talk about that on a future episode coming up here as well. But I kind of wanted to stick to the hockey side because to me, I think we've seen enough training camp, even though Utah Hockey Club starts next week. I think we've seen enough training camp to figure a few things out here. And to me, I wanted to get into 3 pressing needs for this team. Seeing them on the ice, knowing where they have been the last couple of seasons as the Arizona Coyotes, now making the jump to Utah, doesn't magically wave a wand and the problems go away or the things you've been trying to fix. This has not been a playoff team. And there are areas of need and concern that they have had circled for some time now. So to me, there's a few things that, for me, I broke it down really the top 3, and these can be in any order, and in a lot of ways they go hand in hand. But the very first thing, and we have talked about this during the summer, but the defense coming together. Now, this topic is a hot button issue for a host of reasons, not the least of which now is kind of complicated by injury a little bit. And, you know, I've referenced the Robert Bortuzzo signing. I think that the timing of that was fortuitous at this point, because now Bortuzzo, who came in late and is a value signing, is a budget signing for this team, but is going to find himself on a 3-4 pair, ostensibly, to start the offseason. That means Cole will probably end up on the 5-6 pair, but which is not a bad thing. And again, I think that, you know, Ian Cole should be, for the most part, in those minutes. But, you know, this Utah Hockey Club has had a couple of big injuries. Number one at forward, Nick Bukestad, but on defense, John Marino, upper body, week to week. Now it's been updated to the point where he's not expected to make opening night. So that changes the dynamic of the defense quite a bit. And it does, I had already changed my mind on this. I had done some deep dives into watching Marino footage with the Devils. The difference between him in a 3-4 role and a 1-2 role, I actually felt much more comfortable watching him in a 3-4. I think he played better. I think he was a better all-around player in that 3-4 role. Not that he can't evolve and continue to get better and get into that 1-2, but initially I thought when I saw that deal, the next step for him is to be on the right side with Sergachev on the left. Well, now he's not going to be on any side of anybody since he's not going to be ready for the season, and who knows how long it's going to take. But Sean Durzi, then ends up on the right side of Sergachev, which honestly was not expected. Maybe at the very beginning when I was thinking about it, but the more I thought about it, the more I looked into it, it kind of made sense from a standpoint of those are probably your two best defensemen. But here's the thing, and again, with them both being a little bit of live by the sword, die by the sword, they're both offensive minded, they're both willing to jump. You have to keep in mind now that they have to read off each other and they have to learn each other very quickly. And they're going to have to come to an understanding of, okay, someone's jumping, someone's got to stay back. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of 2-on-0s, 3-on-0s going the other way, especially if the puck comes up high in the offensive zone. There's a shot block, it ricochets out the other way. If, let's just for example, Sergachev is trying to force one through and it ricochets out off a defender, goes the other way, and Durzi's already gone deep. The forward coming back now, who hopefully was covering for Durzi, but if Durzi pushed down and it was 4 down low, then you're going to have an odd man with no defenders or one defender who turns out to be a forward. And then Sergachev is going to have to haul to catch up. And again, I'm just using that as an example, but that's part of what my thinking is here. And I feel like this duo has the speed to pull it off. They are smart enough to do it, but the communication is going to be key. Your second pair kind of looks now like it's Valimaki and Bortuzzo, and then you're going to have Cole and Kesselring on the 5-6. So, which is pretty good. That's a stout NHL defense. But again, in the preseason, and I go back to the three pressing needs of the defense coming together, they haven't quite bonded the way I had hoped in the defensive zone just yet. There is a lot of running around, sometimes blown coverages, missed assignments, sometimes just confusion, I think, getting used to the new system for these defenders, which is to be expected, and the forwards. Some of the new forwards or some of the younger forwards still trying to nail down where they're supposed to go, what their routes are, whether it's 5-on-5, whether it's penalty killing, whatever it is in that defensive zone. So you have to establish that. It takes time, okay? As a fan of the Utah Hockey Club, you can expect growing pains because so much has changed. Coach is the same. Players who've been here before, I expect a little more out of them, actually, as far as knowing the system. But Valimaki didn't play with Bortuzzo last season, obviously. So that's completely new. Durzi didn't play with Sergachev last season. That's completely new. Kesselring didn't play with Cole. So you've got all three pair are playing with new partners. So to me, this is probably 1A, 1B, all of it coming together defensively, especially in the zone. And again, I know in the preseason, there's a lot of learning that goes on and you have players in and out of the lineup. But I really do want to see a little bit more discipline, first and foremost, of kind of knowing where you're supposed to be, not chasing, making sure that, if you're back in a zone and you're supposed to have, this player, or if you're going man to man, that there's that communication there. That's got to grow. So that's one of my concerns. You know what? Why don't we take a break? I've got two more concerns I want to get to. Then the other thing's the immediate impact coming up. Who or what has a chance to make an immediate impact, and who's got the potential to surprise? I always like that question. I used to ask that question when I was in Nashville of Barry Trotz, every training camp. And I would say, who surprised you? Who jumped out at you? And the answer is not always what you would think, to be honest with you, from a coaching perspective. Sometimes it's one of those things where you're not exactly ready for the answer. So I have my thoughts about who I think it could be. So I'm kind of curious to see who does have that potential to surprise. So we'll take a look at that here in just a moment. All right, let's take a quick break. We will come back with more here in just a moment. And a portion of today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Let me go ahead and get that up there on the bottom for you. And NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll start with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. So make sure that you check that out. Visit FanDuel.com. Look at the odds. Check it out. What's going on in and around. And it's not just the NFL, although Obviously, football is in swing right now, but you'll have NHL coming up, NBA, Major League Baseball playoffs are going on right now. So there's so much to have happen. And you know what? This is just a great time if you're a sports fan. Fall and spring are the best, and FanDuel.com is where you want to be. So again, remember, $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. FanDuel.com. All right, so as we get back into it here, just taking a look at what's going on in and around the National Hockey League, getting closer. As a matter of fact, I do want to note that by the time you hear this, possibly even, the game might be over. The show comes out on Friday, October 4th. The Sabres are already playing over in Europe against the Senators, and so they've already started the regular season. Actually, pardon me, it is not the Sabres and the Senators. The Sabres just played the Senators in preseason. Sabres are actually over there, and they are going to be playing, oh my goodness, now I got the Devils. Thank you, I knew that. So the New Jersey Devils opening it up over there with the Buffalo Sabres. Kind of interesting, little Lindy Ruff, old team, new team with his new old team, if you follow that one. But that's the situation. They're starting early, and so everybody else getting it kicked off next week. Of course, Utah Hockey Club, a big opener at home against the Chicago Blackhawks. The eyes of the hockey world are going to be on the Utah Hockey Club. And so now we'll get to numbers 2 and 3 on my pressing needs chart. The penalty kill's got to improve. This is also something I harped on and have talked about in the offseason. It does tie into the defense. And when you have new players, the hardest thing to do in hockey is kill a penalty because it is the most physically exertive thing you can do. It is stopping, starting, stopping, starting. There's no turns. There's no circling. It is straight lines. And when the puck moves, you move with it. Whether you're playing a diamond, whether you're playing a box, whatever you're doing, if you're collapsing, the system that is in place is going to require you as a player to bust your butt. And sometimes you get stuck out there. Just if you're having a rough time clearing the puck, that's why they try to keep penalty kill shifts as short as possible. But it doesn't always happen. Sometimes you get stuck out there. It is exhausting. But you have to stay disciplined in your area. You have to make sure that you're getting your stick in the lane. And again, I go back to the discipline factor. This is even more important in killing a penalty. So far in the preseason, it hasn't been the best result for the Utah Hockey Club. And I really noticed that some of the teams with some more, I'll say, offensive-minded talent have shown an ability to open up the box, execute some cross-ice passes, get some one-times off, move the puck east-west as opposed to north-south. And that is difficult for goaltenders. When your goaltender has to go left to right in the middle of a game situation, and especially if there's a screen, they might not see the pass right away. The puck might go over to the other side, and they don't even see it arrive. Awful hard to make that save. So that's obviously that's why teams look for it. But that is something that I think the Utah Hockey Club is going to have to sharpen. They're going to have to work on taking those away, like those passes that get knifed through the box. They're going to have to be a little bit more agile in their coverage. So that's one that I look for them to improve as well. And then the other thing, the third thing I've got on here, there are several players that need to take a big step forward in their development. And it's a pretty long list, and it's not just the guys who are going back to junior, going back to the minors, but the players who are staying up top as well, to me, that need to take a big step forward in their development. And so as I go and just take a look at the roster, I think certain players, you know who they are. You know who your Keller, Schmaltzes, Krauses are. But there's plenty of guys I want to see take a big step forward. I think Matthias Michelli, Barrett Hayton is a good couple of guys I want to see take a step forward. Logan Cooley, Josh Doan, certainly Dylan Guenther has the pressure of the new contract that'll kick in next year. But that pressure is still there because he signed that big deal now. And there's expectations that come along with that. Defensively, Dursey is 25. And defensemen, I think, peak a little bit later, which is exciting when you think about Sean Dursey and where he is, what he's producing right now. He has looked very good to me in the preseason as far as he's been very active. He's been noticeable. He's made some mistakes. Don't get me wrong. I mean, you take a look at Durzi's stats here. 3 games, 1 goal, 2 assists, but a -2. A couple of minutes in penalties. He does have a power play marker on there, so 5 shots is contributing. But again, you want to see him clean up a bit in the defensive end of the ice. But I think he's a guy with the potential to take a huge step forward, along with Mikhail Sergachev this year. And Sergachev's step forward is a little different. I think he's a more developed player, but coming off an injury that, could lead to a little bit of trepidation, could be difficult. It's also the first time he's been the guy in his NHL career. He's always been behind Victor Hedman in Tampa Bay. Hedman was always the lead guy. He didn't have to shoulder the responsibility. The spotlight wasn't on him. It was on Stamkos. It was on Hedman. And he didn't have to worry about that. Now he does. Now he will be, I'd argue, one of the most visible players for the Utah Hockey Club. And his development is going to be a little bit different. It's going to be a lot of mental. It's going to be a lot of maturity. I don't see a reason why he can't handle it. He's such a skilled, smooth skater, great puck mover. Can get the puck through, distributes. We saw that a couple times. As a matter of fact, he had some really nice assists on the power play. But that's a different kind of development there. But Valimaki, Kesselring, those guys, and again, projecting them into the top 6, especially with the Marino injury. To me, those are the steps forward you want to see taken as they kind of get into their mid-20s. Now is the time where you really want to see them solidify their status as NHL defenders. So big step forward this year. And even with a big step forward, I'm still not 100% sure this team is a playoff team. I think they're going to get close. I don't think they get in necessarily this year again. And I'll say it, they have to overachieve to do it because they're in a tough division. But if there is a division in the West where I can see 5 teams making it, it's the Central. So I think they have a chance if they start well. They just have to defend better and clean things up, and the PK power play looks good. So I'm pleased with that. All right, moving it right along to the immediate impact. Who or what can make the immediate impact? And I think, to me, what can make the immediate impact? This one, it's going to sound cheesy, but it's really not. I'm leading off with the Utah market because I think the fans have a huge ability to make an impact. It's a small building. It's going to be loud. And that home ice advantage, if you can make a building a miserable place to play, people don't want to come to your building. They know that they're going to get drowned out. They know that they're going to face a fierce environment. I think that's actually going to be a really good first-year advantage. And I hope the momentum carries for Utah Hockey Club, but I think it's going to be huge. So I think that can make an immediate impact. Something else that's going to need to make an immediate impact is Mikhail Sergachev. And yes, I know that sounds like I'm stating the obvious. However, for Utah to have a legit chance of the playoffs this year, his impact has to be on both sides. And you bring in, so Durzi, if he's going to be 60, 65, 70 points this year, taking a bit of a step forward, Sergachev 70 to 80 points this year, maybe point a game guy, could happen. Here's the other thing, I'll say this: if Sergachev by Christmas is at a point a game pace, there's no reason why we're not talking about him for the Norris. Floating his name out there, getting his candidacy out there early. He'll get some sympathy for it. He'll get some notice just because he's with Utah. I think that could be a very real campaign. Now, I don't think he'll win it if they're not a playoff team, but I think he can be in the conversation, especially if the team is surprising a little bit early, is doing well. And again, as much as I hate to say it, there should be 2 defenseman awards in the NHL. There should be best offensive defenseman, best defensive defenseman. That's not a thing. It's the Norris Trophy goes to the best overall defenseman. I think Sergachev's name will be in the conversation, though. And I believe that he's a guy who has a chance to make an impact. Up front, these are two players that I'm predicting are going to make an impact this year and really are going to be much more seen this year. And I'm going to start with Barrett Hayton. I've really liked watching Hayton in the preseason for the most part. Now, Hayton's got 2 years left at 2.65 million, so getting paid well enough to need to produce at this point. I really have been pretty impressed. But here's the other thing that I think Hayton's got going is the positioning of everything at this point, because it looks like Barrett Hayton will start the year as the number one center between Clayton Keller and Nick Schmaltz. If that is the case, and I know I teased fantasy stuff earlier, but man, Hayton, late round sleeper, huge points. And I think that as the number one center with Keller and Schmaltz, two established, really good players, I don't see why Barrett Hayton is not threatening a huge points increase. And we'll talk about him, because actually that he leads me into the potential to surprise, because I think he has the potential to surprise people who are sleeping on him. Being the number one center, being with those guys, he is going to take a lot of people by storm, and no one's going to see it coming. So we'll get into that. As a matter of fact, why don't we do that? Let's grab another break here, and we'll come back. We'll start to talk about the potential to surprise. I've got more names in there for you here, and we'll come back with that in just a moment. So stay tuned. There is more Locked On Utah Hockey Club podcast coming your way. Okay, so as we come back here in our final segment to wrap things up, talking a little bit for me about the potential to surprise, I did lead us in there with the discussion of Barrett Hayton. Looking at Hayton, the other reason why I think he's going to catch people unaware, back it up 2 seasons, had a good, not quite breakout season, but you could see what was on the horizon. I think what was it, 43 points, something like that, something in the low to mid 40s. Really looked like maybe now we're going to start seeing some gains. But last year, a definite setback year, only 33 games. And even in those 33 games, really disappointing output. 3 goals in 33 games, 10 points. That's not what you're paying a guy over $2.5 million for. So last year was a difficult one, and I'm sure a disappointing one for Barrett Hayton. So knowing that, Hayton comes back this year now and has the chance. I think he probably did slip off the radar for a lot of people as far as their expectations. But if he starts this year, number one center with Keller and Schmaltz, I don't see why he wouldn't stick there for the majority of the season, unless somebody manages to just knock him out of his job. But I don't see it happening. I mean, I'd love to tell you that Logan Cooley all of a sudden jumps up and takes the 1C, but I just don't know that that's happening this season. So I think Hayton's going to catch people sleeping. So he's got the potential to surprise. Another one that I think is going to catch people sleeping, although not so much now that the big contract's been handed out, is Dylan Guenther. Because Guenther hasn't even played a full season yet. And because of that, I think there are a lot of people who scratch their heads, maybe think Bill Armstrong's off his rocker a little bit with handing out that big deal. But again, we talked about it on a previous episode. That's one of the reasons why in today's NHL, you pay your GMs, the good ones, to make these decisions, because you do have to often pay a player based on potential. It's not until a player's hitting their late 20s, early 30s that they're getting paid based on results. To be honest with you, some guys with potential are still trading on it at that point of their career. But at this point, it was, let's say, a calculated risk on Dylan Guenther. I don't think it's a stretch by any means. I think that the deal, 8 years, $57.14 million, not a huge stretch. In the preseason, he's already got 3 goals, 4 points, -2. Not my favorite stat. I know plus minus is not always a good teller of the story, and for those of you who don't know, by the way, plus minus is 5-on-5 goals. So if you are a plus player, that means 5-on-5, you're on the ice for more goals scored than against. And if you're a minus player, you're on the ice for more goals against than for. Has nothing to do with the power play. Wouldn't be fair to give guys killing a penalty a minus because you're a man down. Wouldn't be fair to give the guys a man up a plus. So it applies to even strength situations. So that's where your plus minus comes in. I would like to see that improve a little bit, but I think Guenther has the potential to surprise and can come in and be a big point getter as well. The top 6 of this Utah Hockey Club, honestly, is really good. Even the top 9, but Keller, Hayton, Schmaltz, and then Kraus, Cooley, Guenther, left to right, those top 6, that's pretty stout. That's pretty stout. And I'm just going to honorable mention, I didn't actually have him on my list, but I'm going to honorable mention Josh Doan. Uh, maybe even playing on the third line. Right now, the battle seems to be between Doan and Kyler Yamamoto, although, boy, 2 goals for Yamamoto the other night in the preseason, I thought was great. Good showing and has a chance to make the roster as well. And again, going back to talking about the forwards and the injuries going on right now, Nick Bukestad, upper body, not going to be ready for the start of the season. So that does create an opening. That brings me to my other potential to surprise. And this one you might think is a little bit of a reach, but I honestly don't think it is. Cole Beaudoin has actually played really well in the preseason. I like his game. I think he's just got that presence to him. Now he's 6'2", he's 210. Was this year's number 24 pick. TJ Ginla's already gone back to Kelowna of the Western Hockey League. But you know what? And maybe Beaudoin doesn't make it out of camp, but could be back at some point. I could see Beaudoin maybe making an impact. 62 points in 67 games with the Barrie Colts last year in the OHL. I'm going to be curious to see because, again, no points. So not having that, but I really feel like he's making an impression on people. I don't know if I'm going to go out on a limb and say he makes the roster out of camp, but I am going to go out there and say I think he makes enough of an impression that we see him again at some point. So that'll be interesting to me to keep an eye on him. So that is my other part of the potential to surprise. So looking forward to the start of the NHL season. Again, you're catching this on a Friday. It is the opening in Europe. Devils and Sabres are going at it. The season with those games count. That 100% is real in the NHL standings. But really, for us, what we're looking forward to is down the road here just a little bit as the Utah Hockey Club and Chicago Blackhawks are going to face it off. We're almost there. We are almost to the start of the season. So want to say thank you to everybody. If you made it this far, thanks for sticking around. Robyn will be back. Don't worry. I'm not going to be solo on all of these. However, Robyn will be back soon. Just a much needed day off. And you know what? That's all right with me. And I hope it was all right with you as well. So any questions, any comments, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter at Callahan on air or X. That's where I'm most active. That's where you're going to catch me most of the time. So feel free to say hi, drop your thoughts in the comments to the video as well. Always looking forward to seeing what everybody has to say, what your thoughts are. And you know what? If you have thoughts for a future topic, if you have thoughts about the club or things you'd like to see us tackle or questions that you have, even if it's about Tucson, the American Hockey League, how this is all going to break down once the season starts, feel free to let us know. So, all right. Thanks for checking it out, everybody. We appreciate you being here for another edition of the Locked On Utah Hockey Club podcast.